in staying on the topic of legislation that got voted on or voted down yesterday, one of the other pieces of legislation that just kind of it's been confusing for me has been this legislation dealing with the franchise associate franchise groups. Think of like the McDonald's, think of the Burger Kings, think of the those other like one
Subway,
day 3 day blind Subway. It does not just fast food, but there's a lot of different
right?
franchises that are out there, 7-Elevens and so forth. And basically, the legislation said if a franchise is more than 10, which all these companies that we've mentioned are, if they're more than 10 different if more than 10 franchises, then the state would create a council that is made up of people appointed by the governor and the legislative leaders, which are Democrats, and they would be the ones who would help determine what the wages and benefits are for anyone who works in these franchisees. And so it would basically, you would have government determining what the pay is and the benefits for
Benefits.
people working in this franchise.
Think about that. I mean, this really is one of those things that um, you have this thing of only in California. Would you even think of that? First of all, let's talk about franchises for a second. I mean, people get into franchises because they want to have their own business, but they may not have the capital or they may not have the background experience. And so going into a franchise is a way to bring that in that you may not have and allow you to get into that business where otherwise you may not have been able to get into that business. And why do people do that? Well, number one, they're entrepreneurial. But also, and I know this firsthand, a lot of times what they do is, especially folks that always wanted to own a business, the American dream, they want to build something so that they can grow it, so that their children and their grandchildren have something to carry on. So it raises the family up. And what this does is, first of all, you got to ask the question, why would you have the government of California determine anything when they can't do their own job right? Let's start there. The employment, EDD, all of the people that got ripped off for that, all of the taxpayers that got ripped off of that. We have yearly droughts in this state for the last 20 plus years that we never get fixed. We have a train that goes to nowhere that we've spent billions of dollars on. Why in God's name you would take anything that is an economic engine of a state and put the government in charge of it is just beyond the pale of understanding. Then you have folks determining a lot of these jobs, let's be honest with them, are either entry level jobs for people that are trying to get work experience, or, it's unfortunately become something now where people who, need to get a second job will do that. And, you start putting the rules, you leave it to a commission, an unelected commission of politicians, which is what this thing is, and you say they're going to determine for you how much you pay your employees, what benefits you give your employees. Here's another one that they've tried to do, whether or not you can fire your employees. So if someone's doing something with the French fry maker that he's not or she is not supposed to be doing, there's going to be a set of rules that says whether or not you can fire that person. I mean, why would anybody, again, the only thing that California has going for it is this huge market of people. That's the only thing that would make anybody want to start a franchise or buy into a franchise. And if you're a franchisor and you're looking at this, your question has to be, is what's there potentially for my market worth this aggravation, worth me giving up this, control? And, I don't think franchisors are going to really buy into that. It really is amazing how sometimes this state will do things that are so counterproductive to creation of jobs, and helping the business climate of our state.
One other thing too is that with the, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I've got to assume there's got to be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of these businesses. Does does the 7-Eleven over in Reading get the same type of income or everything else as the one in San Francisco, as the one in Fresno or Modesto, as the same one in Bakersfield, as the same one, at the Grapevine, as the same one in Los Angeles and San Diego or the Inland Empire?
Right.
And so how do you determine what that pay is and what those benefits are? Which where you have the different economics for each one, and is this commission going to say, okay, if you're, for your zip code, this is what the rate's going to be, and what was the point of this whole $15 an hour? I mean, that was supposed to be your base,
Right.
and now you want to create this, like I said, this, like you said it really well, this unelected commission of politicians, really, who gets to determine what their income is going to be and other conditions of work, which is, it just seems absurd that all that gets centralized back in Sacramento.
Right. There's no oversight of it, number one. And number two, you don't, when you screw up as bad as this state does on a whole bunch of things, the last thing you should do is give them more power. Let's talk common sense, the name of the show. If you can't get EDD right, if you spend billions of dollars on a train that you can't finish doing, if you do all of these other things that we see are problems in this state that are never addressed, why would you take something like that and give the power of that to the government? It makes, again, what's going to happen is eventually you're going to reach the point where you have the franchisors say, well, you know what, if you want to build something in California, if you want to, have my Subway, if you want to open a Subway shop in California, then you probably have to pay an extra fee because of all of the headaches that you're going to have to deal with. And your point is well taken. We went through hell and high water so that California would have $15 an hour things. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, that's really not enough. It's just, it's par for the course.
Well, I'm going to throw another little twist in there. What about the dishwasher who's at the local down the street, washing dishes
Right.
at $15 an hour,
Right.
or someone else working at a hotel or someone else working at these other places, and the thing that has always gotten to me is a lot of these were jobs that were supposed to be entry level jobs,
Right.
a place where you go get experience. It was especially important for a lot of teenagers, people who were in college. I had a lot of friends who worked at these places while in high school, while in college, and it was just a way for experience. And when you make this situation that we've had over the last couple of years, and this is, I guess, the travesty of it, where it has become a place where people need because the arguments that they say is, well, how is a family of 2 or 3 or 4 going to survive off of this? And it's like, at point, it was never intended to be that.
Right.
It was intended for you to get the experience, maybe go to the community college and get some credits, go to school, go do other things, learn it, so that way you can move on to a different field. And for some people, they've done well. They've worked at McDonald's, become the manager there. They themselves have gone out to open up their own franchise, place. But for a lot of folks, it's a place that was been a kind of a stepping stone.
Well, it's exactly what you said. I mean, what it is, and I remember, of course, growing up, it was a place where you were taught responsibility. I mean, you're responsible for showing up on time. You're responsible for putting X number of hours in, working while you're doing that, dedicated to whatever it was you're doing to do it the best way possible. And so, yeah, it is looked at differently. But here's the other thing, and I just want to keep beating the drum of the common sense thing. We have a shortage of people working. Okay, I mean, I went to the Dunkin' Donuts down the street the other day, and they only had drive-through because they didn't have enough people to work inside. So how does this help that store get more customers, and by being able to hire more people to work the inside? Because unless you're a Dunkin' fanatic like I am, I'm not going to sit in my car in a line five cars deep to get my iced coffee. So, how do you get more people that want to work there? You don't do it by setting up a state commission that determines how much those people are going to get paid and forces that franchisor of that particular Dunkin' Donuts to have to take more money and put it into those employees. It doesn't help solve the problem we have today, which is not enough people working in a lot of these places. It does the exact opposite. And so, again, it's kind of like, common sense went the way of the mask at the Ram game the other day.
Yeah, that is true. And we'll see what happens with the legislation. That legislation has now moved on to the other house. In addition, as we talked about the healthcare legislation that wasn't able to get the sufficient votes, the author of that legislation said he's coming back with something different.
Right.
And so, as we find out, what happens with those two pieces of legislation, we'll make sure that we inform you, and making sure that we keep you informed on these things. And really, you need to find out how is your local legislator voting on these items. There's still a lot of unanswered questions, not just on the healthcare, but this franchise piece of legislation, which we will include a link in our description so people can read about it. And so, and we'll see how it goes from there.
Makes no sense.
You know?
It's I mean, maybe all of this is why the groundhog died. Who knows?